Hello, I'm Jina Kim, the host of the GEOVISTA. With just over a month until US President-elect Donald Trump takes office, the global economy is facing new challenges. The Trump administration's second term is expected to implement even more aggressive and extensive tariff policies. What strategies will he use this time to pressure the international community? Let's analyze the situation here on the GEOVISTA.
It's the most beautiful word there is, tariff. And these stupid people, stupid politicians, they don't like, look, they're either dumb or they're corrupt.
For President-elect Trump, tariffs have been one of the most powerful tools to enforce US national interests. During the 2024 presidential campaign, he proposed a universal tariff, signaling his intent to actively use tariff policies as an economic, political, and diplomatic leverage. However, it's crucial to evaluate Trump's tariff policy through the dual lens of its practical feasibility and its role as a negotiation tool. During his previous term, he often used tariff as a bargaining tool, imposing them momentarily and later withdrawing them. One notable example is his approach to Mexico. During his earlier presidency, Trump strongly criticized illegal immigration across the US-Mexico border and accused Mexico of being passive in taking sufficient action. He threatened to impose tariffs on Mexican products, pressuring the Mexican government to respond more decisively, a very bold move. In June 2019, he announced a 5% tariff on Mexican goods, with plans to increase it by an additional 5% each month, reaching up to 25%. This quickly brought Mexico to the negotiation table. Mexico agreed to tighten enforcement on migrants heading to the US and to deploy its National Guard to curb illegal immigration from Guatemala. After securing these concessions, Trump announced on Twitter that the US has reached a great agreement with Mexico and withdrew the proposed tariff. This incident exemplified how Trump's tariff policy served as a tool for political and diplomatic leverage. He continued to use surprise tariff announcements to pressure other countries. Brazil and Argentina were among the targets. In a sudden tweet, Trump announced the tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from these two countries. He claimed that Brazil and Argentina had devalued their currencies to enhance their export competitiveness at the expense of US agricultural products.
Because it's very unfair to our manufacturers and very unfair to our farmers. Our steel companies will be very happy and our farmers will be very happy with what I do.
Despite widespread consensus that the currency depreciation in these economically struggling countries was driven by market forces and unstable political situation rather than deliberate government manipulation, this argument didn't resonate with President-elect Trump. In the end, both countries expanded agricultural trade cooperation with the US, meeting the Trump administration's demands and avoiding the threatened tariffs. Countries in Asia were no exception. President-elect Trump pointed to the trade imbalance between the US and Japan, demanding greater access to Japan's agricultural markets, while using the threat of automobile tariffs as leverage. He warned of imposing tariffs of up to 25% on Japanese cars and auto parts. In the end, Japan agreed to significantly reduce or eliminate tariffs on US agricultural products, prompting the US to suspend its planned tariff measures. This raises the question, were tariffs being used as a tool of economic coercion? However, the Trump administration framed this as a major victory for American agriculture.
It's unacceptable. It's a horrible deal made by Hillary. It's a horrible deal, and we're going to renegotiate that deal.
South Korea was also a target of President-elect Trump's tariff threats. He criticized the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement as a horrible deal and pushed for renegotiations to address the trade deficit. Throughout this process, he frequently signaled his intention to impose a 25% tariff on Korean automobiles. Given that the US is one of the largest export markets for Korean cars, such a measure would have dealt a significant blow to South Korean companies. Ultimately, in 2018, the Trump administration leveraged the 25% tariff threat to renegotiate the Korea-US FTA under more favorable terms. The revised agreement included provisions such as South Korea increasing its import quota for U.S. automobiles and accepting a delay in the phase-out of U.S. tariffs on Korean light trucks. While South Korea faced certain tariff adjustments, it managed to avoid the imposition of broad tariffs.
Much better deal with South Korea. We had a horrible, horrible deal, and we just signed that. That's worked out well, and they're happy, we're happy.
A tariff policy often involves withdrawing tariffs once the other party changes its behavior. This approach leads many view his proposed universal tariff as a strategic negotiation tool rather than full implementation. In line with this perspective, Trump's Treasury Secretary nominee, Scott Bessent, and Commerce Secretary nominee, Howard Lutnick, both said tariffs should be used as a bargaining chip. Additionally, Kevin Cramer, a Republican senator close to Trump, also expressed a similar view that the appropriate way to use tariff is using them as a negotiation tool. However, the full implementation of the universal tariff policy cannot be entirely ruled out. This is due to the strong emphasis on enhancing the price competitiveness of American-made products. During his campaign, President-elect Trump hinted that this policy would differ from past approaches.
And our trade policies will make it very, very rich. That's why a guy like Elon Musk is supporting me, because he knows what's going to happen.
Recently, even President Joe Biden has stepped in to criticize President-elect Trump's universal tariff plan, calling it a major mistake. The criticism stems from concerns about the potential negative impact of universal tariffs on the U.S. economy. Implementing universal tariff could lead to rising import prices, a decline in real income, and a resurgence of inflation within the U.S. There are also concerns about conflicts with existing free trade agreements or World Trade Organization regulations. It's no surprise that opinions on universal tariffs are divided, even within the Republican Party. The direction of tariff policy under Trump's second administration remains unpredictable. Whether intended as a negotiation tool or for actual implementation, one thing is clear: the entire world is on edge. Now we've just looked at how President-elect Trump has utilized tariffs to maximize economic security interest. Let's take a closer look at the potential impact of Trump's second-term trade policies on our industries and economy. Joining us today is one of the country's leading trade experts, Professor Hyo-Young Lee from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Hello, Professor Lee. Back in 2018, President Trump actually threatened to impose high tariffs on Korean products. So there are concerns about potential targets this time again. So what kind of products within the Korea-US trade system does Trump see the most problematic?
If we look at the trade basket between the U.S. and Korea, the top 5 export products that Korea exports to the U.S. are automobiles, automobile parts, petroleum products, semiconductors, and batteries. And in particular, the automobiles exports has been enjoying a trade surplus with the U.S. during the past 20 years. And more recently, batteries exports to the U.S. market has increased significantly during the last 4 years or so. If we look at the strategy that the U.S. is pursuing, there is much emphasis on making in America. In other words, it wants to become a global manufacturing country in the chip sector and also for the automobiles industry. And so it would try to stop exports of import products that would compete with its domestic automobile manufacturers. And it's trying to build up an advanced manufacturing facility for chips manufacturing. And so I believe that if the Trump administration wants to impose tariffs against Korea, and the most easily targeted areas would be the automobiles industry and the semiconductors.
Okay. There are also some arguments that President Trump in the past used the tariff policy to address other issues like drug trafficking or immigration, not just the trade deficit issue, right? So I'm just wondering if President Trump uses the same approach, using the tariff policy as a negotiation tool to fix other problems.
Even before coming to office, President-elect Trump has promised that he will impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for dealing with the illegal immigrant issue and drug trafficking issue. Even under the Biden administration, there have been attempts to use the tariff policy or the trade policy to address issues like human rights. Under Biden, there was this legislation called the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which actually authorized the imposition of import bans on products coming in from China, Xinjiang region, that were presumably using forced labor. But again, although in appearance they may not seem directly related to trade and economic issues, they're actually related because the forced labor issue is actually linked to cheaper labor costs.
Of course.
And that means price competitiveness in the US market. And so although it is a human rights issue, it's also an economic issue as well. And as for illegal immigrant and drug trafficking issue, this is also related to the competitiveness of the US manufacturing industry and the employment of American workers.
In the long term.
Yes, in the long term. And so this issue is also indirectly linked to the US economy. I think he will definitely use tariffs as a tool to address these issues, which are in the underground, really economic issues as well.
Yeah, actually, key issues for the South Korean company might be IRA and CHIPS Act, because many South Korean companies have invested huge amount of money under these policies.
Yes.
President-elect Trump already warned that he's going to cut subsidies under these policies. So how should Korean companies respond to these changes?
Actually, I think we should divide the CHIPS Act subsidies and the IRA subsidies. President-elect Trump actually didn't pledge to eliminate or repeal the CHIPS Act subsidies, although he did express his criticism against the subsidization program, because if the foreign companies are receiving the subsidies, he especially showed his dissatisfaction with the CHIPS Act subsidies going to companies like TSMC, and he believed that these companies were only receiving US government subsidies and not remaining in the US. So his dissatisfaction came from sort of misunderstanding of the CHIPS Act subsidies. However, there are also experts saying that the CHIPS Act subsidies could remain intact because it actually provides benefits to Republican-dominated states as well. And one of the largest beneficiaries of the CHIPS Act subsidies is the US domestic firm Intel. It is more likely that the CHIPS Act subsidies may remain intact rather than being repealed as a whole. There may be modifications of the implementation guidelines for providing the CHIPS Act. And so for companies like Samsung, which are intend to receive the CHIPS Act subsidies, I think that they should prepare for some modifications of the implementation guidelines for receiving the CHIPS Act subsidies, and try to adjust to that change situation in the future. As for IRA, I think it's a little bit different. I think it is more likely that the IRA could be repealed because the incoming Trump administration has a very different policy with regard to energy.
Yes.
And so it has a great dislike for the Biden administration clean energy policy.
Of course.
And he has pledged to repeal, to end the Biden's EV, electric vehicle mandate, once in his first day in office. And so I think it is highly possible that he may try to repeal the IRA. But again, there are benefits of IRA that are also beneficial to the US states as well. And some of the clean energy policies under the IRA are maybe more difficult to repeal as compared to the tax credits that are given to US consumers for purchasing EVs. And so I think it could be partially that some elements of the IRA could be repealed, especially the tax credits for purchasing EVs could be an easier target. So for Korean companies like Hyundai Motors, which are looking forward to the IRA subsidies, they may have more difficult challenge for receiving the IRA subsidies and investing in the US market because they have already pledged to invest huge amounts of money to build EV manufacturing facilities in the US. And another problem is because of the change in policy, the demand for EVs may dwindle because of this dislike for EV and the lack of tax credits for purchasing EVs. But I heard that Hyundai Motors is still going to go on with their plan, and they're going to focus more on increasing their price competitiveness in the US market and increasing the quality of their EV cars in the US market rather than withdrawing from the US market as a whole.
Now then you tell us there are lots of challenges ahead of us, but I also believe that there are areas of opportunities as well. Because a Trump administration will focus more on defense modernization. That means we have some opportunities to cooperate in defense industry, right? So he recently showed interest in shipbuilding industry with South Korea. So what kind of Korean industry that can benefit under his presidency?
As you correctly mentioned, the shipbuilding industry was an area identified by President-elect Trump during his call at the summit level with our Korean government, especially because the shipbuilding industry is important from both the commercial and national security perspective. In terms of commercial, the next incoming U.S. government has high emphasis on the importance of high efficiency and low cost energy. That means that there will be a focus on the production of gas and oil industry, and especially the LNG and LPG gas industries will face high demand. It also implies that there will be increased demand for LNG and LPG carriers, for which Korea is strong in manufacturing. And so I believe that there will be an increased demand in both the gas and oil industry and the carriers and facilities and infrastructure that support the gas and oil industry as well. Another area that could be an opportunity for Korea to cooperate more with the US is the nuclear energy industry, because it's another source of energy that produces high efficiency, low cost. And especially among the nuclear energy plants, the SMR, the small module reactor industry, where Korea is experienced in, I believe could also be an area where the US and Korea could cooperate in the future. And also, since the US is very much interested in advancing its AI industry, it wants to be the global top leader in AI.
Yes.
And what is important for AI are data centers, which consume a lot of electricity and a lot of energy. The Trump administration, I think, it considers nuclear energy plants as an important source of energy, which produces low-cost energy. And so I think the nuclear energy industry has a high potential for cooperation between the two countries.
Like you said, it'll be very interesting to see whether South Korea can turn these challenges into opportunities in the coming years for our national interest.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we wrap up, let's take a look at global issues related to today's topic through a series of photos with me. It has been reported that US President-elect Donald Trump has invited Chinese President Xi Jinping to his inauguration next month. It remains unclear whether President Xi will accept the invitation. This move reflects Trump's distinctive and unilateral diplomatic style. Historically, no foreign head of state has ever made an official visit to attend a US presidential inauguration. By inviting Xi and other world leaders, President-elect Trump underscores the return of his America First agenda. The Bank of Canada announced a 0.5 percentage point interest rate cut on December 11th. During the announcement, the Bank of Canada's governor described US President-elect Donald Trump's high tariff proposals as a new and significant uncertainty. Anticipating the return of trade tensions experienced during Trump's first term, Canada has been preparing countermeasures. Given the US reliance on Canada's crude oil, the country is considering retaliatory actions, such as energy export controls and reciprocal tariffs to protect its domestic industries. With Trump's inauguration set to reignite trade wars, it's time for all stakeholders to be prepared. IKEA has announced that it may need to raise product prices due to US President-elect Donald Trump's proposed tariff policies. Jasper Brodin, CEO of Inca Group, expressed concerns that high tariff would make it challenging to maintain low prices, potentially leading to a decline in consumer spending. Last year, IKEA lowered prices on approximately 2,000 items to support price-sensitive consumers, even at the expense of operating profits. With Trump's second term approaching, the company appears to be facing even greater challenges. President-elect Trump's proposal to impose a 25% tariff on Mexican products has put the U.S. alcohol distribution industry on high alert, with tequila prices expected to rise. Tequila, designated as a WTO geographical indication product, can only be produced in Mexico. High tariffs could lead to higher consumer prices. Some tequila suppliers might choose to absorb the additional cost to maintain retail prices, even at the cost of reduced profits. However, if Mexican tequila becomes less price competitive compared to other alcoholic beverages, a decline in the U.S. demand could ensue, adversely affecting Mexican exports and employment within the industry. This scenario suggests that both sides risk significant economic repercussions if the proposed tariffs are enacted. That's all the news we have prepared for today. We'll be back next week with more stories from around the world. Thank you for joining us. This has been Jina Kim for the GEOVISTA.